Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach, always available too at carolthecoach.com.
Now I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I am married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself? You get what you need.
And that is the key. Do you want to change that about yourself? Well, welcome to the Carol the Coach Show. This is Sex Help with Carol the Coach. And every week we give you and disseminate information that will help you to understand what sexual addiction is about. I have made that my mission because I feel it is so absolutely important to do that. And I got to tell you, there are other people in this community who have also been compelled to do that. And for that reason, I am so excited to have on the show the producer of a documentary called The Courage to Love. And Paul Giannocacci is a marriage and family therapist, and he's a CSAT, and he is working towards educating people about his niche, and that is sexual addiction. Now, Paul actually had created a shout-out to our community. You've heard me talk about it before. It is the CSAT and SASH community. We all work diligently with people who suffer from sexual addiction and or their loved ones. And he talked about this documentary that had just been released called The Courage to Love. And it's now available on DVD, and you can stream the download, and you can rent it versus streaming it on the film website, which is www.thecouragetolove.com. So we're going to be talking to him because you can tell it is absolutely his mission, too, to get the word out. You've heard me be disgruntled before because our psychiatric community is yet to understand or believe that sexual addiction is that indeed an addiction. Now, whether you call it hypersexuality, whether you call it compulsivity, it matters not. What is important is that unless people figure out what treatment plan works the best for them, they can't stop. And since Paul is a CSAT, he knows that it's a combination of the things that I've talked about, and that is, 12-step work, a good CSAT, which is a certified sexual addictions therapist, being able to have somebody like a mentor, a sponsor to help you through it, a fellowship, all the things that you know absolutely make a difference in success of sexual addiction. So I cannot wait, because actually it took him 7 or 8 years to be able to produce this documentary. He had to find more people that were willing to talk about their plight, and that is no easy feat. And I know that to be true, too, because I'm the only certified sexual addictions therapist in Indianapolis, and we are a huge city. So when the news wants me to talk about sexual addiction, they almost invariably ask me, is there somebody who can come on and talk about how difficult this addiction is? In other words, somebody who suffers from the addiction. And it's rare that I can get somebody to come on. Even if we black out their face, change their voice, there's always that fear that they'll be discovered. And, these people live in secrecy for so long that when they're working on managing a recovery program, they're afraid, understandably, that there will be a stigma about them if they come out to the public. So that's why I find this film so well done and fascinating. Can't wait to talk with him at about 9:15. Now, you may be asking, what is sexual addiction? Well, I train on what is sexual addiction, and I don't get hung up on the terminology. I like that we call it sexual addiction because it is indeed that. There is an addiction. It's compulsive. People try to stop. They promise themselves they'll stop. They say it over and over and over again, and then they continue with the behavior. It ruins their families, their friends, their work relationships, and their self-esteem. It causes them lots of problems in their interpersonal and work life. The average time somebody actually looks at porn is from 9 to 5 in the day. So there's all sorts of reasons that people want to stop, and they can't until they put together all the tools. I had a very insightful man tonight talk to me in my group therapy, and he said, I've got to stay focused on the fact that it's not that I'm going to live without my pornography, my masturbation, my infidelity, my voyeurism, my exhibitionism. It's that I have to remember that I'm replacing it with healthy relationships and, most importantly, my spirituality. So if you're an addict out there, I want you to focus on what you are adding to your life by looking at giving it up. What is better because you no longer participate in that behavior, and what have you added to it? Maybe it's that you've added a real fellowship, a group of men and or women that knows what you're going through because they're going through it too, and they're there for you day and night. You could call them at any time. Maybe it's a sponsor, and let's face it, so much of sexual addiction is trauma reenactment. And so many of my clients who have this condition did not have healthy relationships with their mother or their father. So if you're a man and you have this illness and you have a sponsor who's there for you, who helps to guide you, who gives you wisdom, who doesn't judge you, and isn't that kind of like having the ideal father figure? And if you're a woman who has this affliction and you're talking to another woman, somebody older, wiser, has more recovery time, knows the steps, is helping you work through it, isn't that somebody who represents that ideal mother? Now, our sponsors are not supposed to necessarily do that, but let's face it, they do, just in the same way that a therapist represents the ideal mother or father. We know that to be true. So it's an opportunity to form some new newer and healthy relationships where you actually get your needs met. And if you're a partner listening to the show, I know that you've been traumatized. I know that you more than likely have some post-traumatic stress. I know that marrying the man or woman with the addiction has in some way, more than likely, not always, but more than likely, repeated the patterns from your childhood. And if this is the case, there are several things that you have to do. You have to work on your own program. You have to go to COSA. That's that 12-step program for partners of sexual addiction. Working on your own needs, creating your own boundaries, developing your own self-care, and finding somebody who really gets it and can support you. Now, I will be the first to admit that in this business, I am a counselor and have been for, since 1980, so what is that, 35 years. And I'm a life coach. I take people to their highest potential. I help them actualize their life. And what I know to be true is that my work was super easy when I wasn't working in this field. But now that I work in this field, I deal with trauma, I deal with pain, I deal with severe anxiety, and unfortunately, some of the people that I work with put me on a pedestal that I don't belong on. But they're so happy to have somebody who will not judge them that they put me on this pedestal, and at some point, I let them down. Maybe I don't call them soon enough. Maybe I look at them and say, what are you thinking? What do you mean you did that? You know better than that. Regardless, when that happens, I, as a therapist, can get rejected, And what I really know to be true is that what happens in the office happens outside of the office, and what happens outside of the office happens in the office. And so it's my job to hang with individuals to help them to work through their issues, no matter how mad they get at me, no matter how they feel, to hear them, to validate them, and to help them come up with a treatment program that makes it right for them, that takes them to a higher ground to recovery. And, I can say that I'm truly honored to be working with you folks, because what I know to be true, and I've known this all my life, I've been around addicts my entire life, what I know to be true is that when you recover, you are absolutely the people I want to be around. You're a community of people that consistently work on yourself. You're always trying. You're always reading. You're always practicing the principles that make you a better person. And wow, it does not get any better than that. And so I really recognize the work that you have to do. And then I have to say that when you get into full-blown recovery, you truly are the kind of people that most people aspire to. So no matter how much shame you've had, no matter how much secrecy, no matter how much self-loathing, here's the hope, strength, and recovery, people, that you will truly inspire others to be their best person also. And you know how at the end of every show I say, there will only be one of you at all times, so fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. Well, I truly mean that, and that's your higher self. That's your improved self. That's your recovered self. And when you do that, I'm promising you, life gets better. So, again, tonight we're going to be talking with the producer and the writer of The Courage to Love, an amazing documentary that, boy, it took 7 years to complete, and its mission is to help people to understand what this hidden addiction is all about, and to show them that there is hope, strength, and recovery. It just does not get any better than that. So if you're listening to the show tonight, I want you also to go to www.thecouragetolove.com. And if you're interested in reading something pretty fascinating about how this documentary was made, you can go to www.thecouragetolove.com/statement.cfm. And that will give you some idea of what Paul had to deal with in making this all-important documentary. As we're speaking right now, I feel very excited to welcome Paul to the show. And, Paul, I only wish I knew how to really pronounce your name properly. So how do you say your name?
It's Ginocchio. Paul Ginocchio, like Pinocchio.
Oh, now that's easy. Okay, so Paul Ginocchio, welcome to the Sex Help with Carol the Coach show, and what a fantastic documentary you have made.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yes, and I can see why it took 7 years. I mean, it's difficult to find the right people to assist you in the project, and yet you really did find a variety of people that manifest many types of disorders that fall under the umbrella of sexual addiction. So tell me about the beginning of this journey. What made you decide that you were going to create a documentary?
That's a good question. I kind of did video in my background, video production and so forth, and then I found myself going to 12-step meetings for sexual addiction starting back in the mid-'90s, and I didn't really think back then that I was going to combine the two, right, the recovery work and the video production background I had. But when I was in graduate school in like 2005, I was in an addictions class in my graduate course, and they showed a video in the class about some alcoholics talking about alcoholism and so forth, and I just saw how powerful that was and how my classmates responded to that. And then I also had the experience of trying to talk about sexual addiction in that class, and no one knew what I was talking about. I mean, even the teacher was like, is sex addiction really an addiction? And so it was kind of in that moment that I thought, God, I should do a video about sex addiction. And then about 2 years later, I actually started the project, and it kind of just, grew from there.
Well, obviously you wanted people to understand about this addiction because you, too, suffered from the addiction, and you talk about that in the documentary. You're one of the 4 people that shares their story. So give us just a little background about you. I know you don't want to just tell everything because that's what the documentary is all about. It really chronicles each one of your lives and where you believe the addiction started and how it manifested itself. But where did it start for you?
Well, and that's kind of what I wanted to show in the documentary, because I feel like I personally learned more in the 12-step rooms and hearing personal stories than I did from, I'm a therapist myself, so I think there's great value in therapy and books and all that, but I learned so much through personal stories, so I wanted to share mine in the film along with the other characters. And I guess for my own background, my family, I grew up I was born in 68, so I grew up in the 70s, and, my dad had Playboy subscription back then. It used to come in the brown cover in the mail, and they used to keep them on the coffee table in our family room, which was actually, I think, quite normal back then. I mean, I remember even in our dentist's office, there would be like Playboys and stuff. So it was just a different time, I think, in sexual revolution in our culture and so forth. So I think when I was about maybe 9 or 10 or so, I started to really notice the Playboys on the coffee table, and then at some point I started to take them, kind of sneak them, and then that started this whole kind of sneaky, I would, take them into my room and then put them back and make sure my parents, notice, and I think I felt a little power and control in that, versus, and also pleasure in that, and I didn't know at the time, but I think that's what started that mechanism in me that was trying to escape, because I did have a lot of abuse in my family of origin. My dad was very physically abusive, emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, and my mom was kind of the same. So, back then I had no idea that there could be a connection between me kind of taking these Playboys and trying to kind of escape from some of that, really the fear and anxiety I was feeling at that age of my life. And so that's kind of where it started. And then, like any addiction, it kind of grew into Playboys, grew into my cousin back then when I was about maybe 12. I remember he had like more hardcore porn magazines, and I stole one, I remember, from his house, and from him. I mean, he didn't know, and that made me want more. And then videos. God, I had a friend who introduced me to a VHS porno when I was about 13. And I remember, God, that was when, I wanted more videos, man. Because for me, my addict liked that much more than just the visual. I liked the sound and the storyline, and then it just, it took off from there. It just became really problematic and big in my life.
And you're speaking every man's story, and perhaps many, many women's, in that it starts out kind of innocent, and then before you know it, brain lock occurs, and you fixate on something, and then you have that compulsion to continue that behavior, and then it escalates, and it gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
So that's truly the beginning of your story, and obviously at some point you decided that you needed recovery. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so I remember, it's interesting looking back, because I remember when I was like 18 years old, really early on in my life, I remember talking to this counselor at a college I was attending at the time, and I remember he's the first person I ever said, like, I think I have a problem with pornography, and because I can't stop doing it. I lied to my girlfriend about it, and he's like, well, yeah, he's like, you don't need that stuff, and that was his kind of comment to me. And but I think I recognized then, I had no idea about you could get addicted to this stuff back then. I mean, I'm 46, so that was 28 years ago. And but what happened for me was my mom started to date an alcoholic when I was about 20, and I noticed in him one time his hands were shaking when we went to go rescue him, because he was on one of his alcoholic binges, and he had tremors and his hands were shaking. And I remember, like, the next week I was cutting my class at school at my junior college because I was so scared to give a speech. I had like public phobias of giving speeches, and so I cut class because I was so phobic, and I went to the local video store where I would rent pornos. And that just shows you that mechanism of self-soothing, like, I'm scared to give a speech, so I'm going to go get a porno. But I remember that when I brought the porno up to the counter in the video store, my hands were shaking. And I remember thinking at the time, God, is this like the alcoholic? Why are my hands shaking? And why, just a week before I saw my mom's alcoholic boyfriend's hands shaking. So, again, I had no idea of sex addiction or porn addiction at the time, but in my mid-20s, I actually dated a girl who was a nursing student, and she had to go to a 12-step meeting as part of her nursing program, and that's when I realized, because I remember I saw on the meeting list at we went to a CODA meeting, that there's a program called Sex Addicts Anonymous or Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and I was like, oh my gosh, So there is a name for this thing I've been struggling with my whole life, and that's when I started to go to meetings.
Okay, and those meetings were absolutely instrumental in helping you with your recovery. So tell me what that process was like.
Well, So I went to 12-step meetings. I think like a lot of addicts, I flirted with the program for a few years before I really dove in. I needed to do some more research, as they say, and I kept floundering, kept having short-term relationships, kept looking at porn. It just really, and so it was when I lost a relationship actually in my late 20s that I got my first sponsor. And I went to SLAA and got my first sponsor and started working the steps and never turned back. I went to SLAA solidly for 10 years, like minimum 3 meetings a week, and had a sponsor, worked the steps. Ended up sponsoring like 20 to 25 guys, I think, in my 10 years. And that's when I realized I wanted to become a therapist to help others who are suffering, kind of working the 12th step. So I work as a sex addiction therapist now. And like I said, the other piece for my journey was realizing more and more that I wanted to educate about this, because I really realized in my recovery process that, there's just so much silence about this addiction. And, even to this day, I mean, like, gosh, Carol, even sharing this film, I've screened it to 2 different audiences so far. And the last time I screened it about a month ago, my family was in the audience. Well, my mom was, and then my wife's family, and it was very scary to share this this very shameful part of myself with the audience. And for me, it's very healing to get the response I'm getting, which is that, wow, this is so important, you're doing this and you're going to help a lot of people. And I say, it's interesting that I turned something that I'm so ashamed of into something that's that I'm actually kind of proud of now, that I've done all this work and that I can actually help people struggling with it.
Well, you should be proud of yourself. And, that's interesting you would say that even as a therapist, even working with people, even breaking free from the current day shame, you still carry that baggage of shame from the past. And, that's one of the reasons that it was difficult to make this documentary, because so many people, even though they were in solid recovery, they didn't necessarily want to expose themselves to what the public might think about them. Now, I got to ask you, have you experienced any negativity or prejudice as a result of you being part of this documentary?
Not quite yet. I know it's coming. So the couple things that have happened is, along the way of doing the film, I mentioned this on my website, but I did have a character that was initially the female character that I was in my earlier stages of filming the documentary, and she changed her mind about 6 months into the process and threatened to sue me if I used her interview in the film, because she got a new job as a social worker, and she's like, I don't want my boss to know I'm a sex addict and stuff. So I experienced doing the film, the shame of it. And then more recently, again, nothing bad's happened. I've had really great feedback so far from people who've seen it, but I did have a guy who was in my last audience, I guess. He emailed me and really read me the riot act that I have violated, all 3 or 4 of the traditions of the 12-step program by doing this film, and that I, that I had no right to basically, I forgot how he worded it, but, I didn't even respond, because I felt like, we're all adults in this film. There's 4 of us. We're all 12-steppers. We all chose to share our stories to help the addicts who are still suffering. And, yeah, you could argue that I violated the traditions of the 12-step program, but I think that doing the film is more important than staying anonymous. And I think we have for me at least, I'll speak for myself, I feel like I feel the duty to educate about this. And I don't know, I could argue that some of the 12-step philosophy, is reflective of the times that those are written. I mean, this is back in the 30s and 40s, and we live in a different era now, and I think it's exciting to think this film can be seen on the internet. I mean, I have people who've watched this film, download it and watch it, and who've emailed me from all over the world. I mean, that's just exciting. So that's the only thing. And then, Carl, I'll say one other thing. It's interesting because this happened yesterday. So there's 4 people in the film, me, Greg, Jay, and Sylvia. And Sylvia was at the screening that I did a month ago, and it was the first time she saw it with an audience of 200 people, and she got up and talked afterwards with me and answered questions, and it was phenomenal. I think it was very healing for her, too, because as a woman sex addict, I think it's just even a more shameful process. But, she really did well in the film and talking about her experience of getting out of the sex industry, and it was awesome. But so Greg, who's in the film, just emailed me yesterday, and I guess because I'm going up and showing it in Seattle this coming Saturday, and Jay has not seen it yet, and Greg had not seen it, but Greg, I guess, just rented it last night and or the night before last, and watched it and said, "Fantastic film, Paul. I'm so glad you did it, and I want to talk with you because I was really uncomfortable with being in the film and seeing myself in the film, and I salute you for doing it, but I want to talk to you because I feel uncomfortable, and I don't imagine he's going to change his mind about being in it or anything like that, but and it's a little too late for that anyways, but it's kind of disheartening to think, God, this is the shame here again, that he saw the film, he's in it, but he's feeling uncomfortable with it being out there in the world.
Well, boy, I can't imagine what it's like to be you, because clearly you get that shame, and so you don't want to inflict that upon anybody, but at the same time, what a gift any of those people are giving to be able to understandably share their story, their hope, and their recovery.
Well, Carol, so I'm gonna probably talk to Greg this week. So my hope is that, because I've seen the film twice now in front of an audience, like I said, and the audience reactions have been really blown my mind. I mean, it's totally exceeded my expectations the way people respond to watching it with an audience. And so my hope is that, because I think he watched it there night, and on his laptop at home, and downloading it online, and that's just a different experience. And I think him seeing it with an audience of people and seeing the really positive reaction, and a lot of people have said, God, just how courageous it is, and how honest, and how much it's going to help people. I think he'll really see that past the shame and the discomfort is really the legacy that we will leave behind. Being able to share our stories, and who knows how many people will be affected and helped by seeing the film. I mean, that's my hope, is that if it just saves one family or one marriage. I had a couple, Carol, call me just like 5 days ago and say that they watched the film together and they want to come in and do therapy because they saw themselves in their marriage in the film, and and his struggles. And so that was like, wow, it's so neat to hear that someone sees the film and is going to try to get help for themselves.
Well, absolutely, and that's what, if I were you, I would be so pleased about. I know that obviously this kind of documentary is not only about normalizing an illness to people that have it, but it's also about educating the public about what it is and what people can do to get healthy. And when our own psychiatric community still has trouble understanding that it's an addiction, I can believe that the bigger community would also. And yet, to me, it feels, I tell all my clients and I tell all the people that I train, we're like pioneers in the field. 50 years from now, 100 years from now, there will be hospitals for sexual addiction. It just hasn't happened yet. People are at the growing stages because of the Internet, basically. That makes it so anonymous, so accessible, and so available, And so, again, I can't imagine what it was like to put this thing together. And truly, the clarity of the film production in and of itself is really great. The pictures that you show of everybody's upbringing and it depicts where they came from and where they're at presently, and it demystifies some pretty stereotypical sexual addictions. When people hear sexual addiction, now my listeners know better, But when people hear that, I think they think pedophilism. You know, they go for the worst possible sexual deviation. And I'm always saying, no, it is not pedophilism. You know, it's exhibitionism, it's voyeurism, it's frauderism, it's fantasy, it's, you know, I just go through the list that Patrick Carnes teaches us about. And you, too, were trained by Patrick.
Yeah.
And I felt like your documentary really went through the recovery tasks and what it takes to get healthy.
Well, it's a little glimpse. I mean, there's only so much I could do in an hour film, but I wanted more to focus on, like you said, just, you know, a little bit about each character's childhood, some of the wounding that each of us, because I like the idea that, you know, this is about kind of a response to wounding, and you know, so Sylvia ended up becoming a sex worker because her wound was around not being seen, being neglected, you know, and so, boy, as a sex worker, she got validated and seen. You know, she stripped for a while, and that really fed into that wound of hers. You know, Jay felt like his mom was very controlling, and so he learned, and then this neighbor exposed himself to his mom, and he saw the power that had, and he started exposing himself to people, and it was about a power rush for him. And, you know, Greg had the father wound. He felt like he didn't get the love from his father he wanted, and even though he sees himself as a straight man, he's had like hundreds and hundreds of anonymous encounters with men sexually to get like a validation, an affirmation. And for me, mine was just a reaction to, you know, abuse from my father, kind of enmeshment from my mother, and porn became, you know, this gateway drug. And then, you know, I got a lot of validation and affirmation from women, and I was kind of like a sex and love addict because I loved being in love, and I loved the next conquest, and I ended up, you know, loving paying for sex for a while, and it just, you know, but it was all around that original wound I had of just kind of not feeling like I was good enough, and and then, you know, I wanted to share a bit of...
actually was, I was looking at, I was going to present it and talk about it at a retreat that I was getting ready to do, and I had another person take a look at it, and he said, you know, what came across most of all from looking at the four people in the documentary was the wounding they had experienced in childhood. And I said, you know, my experience is 85% of the clients I work with had that kind of wounding, whether it's severe neglect, abuse, sexual acting out, or enmeshment, which is what you talk about and what Paul talks about. I think it's Paul, isn't it? But clearly, Greg, sorry about that. But clearly, there's that 10 or 15% of my clients that they got involved with pornography, and it was a habit disorder, and they didn't have that wounding to begin with. Yeah. And so I want to remind our listeners that it's not always about wounding, but for those clients that have been wounded, for those addicts who have been wounded, they've got to do their emotional work to get healthy.
Yes. Yeah, the Internet's, you know, I mean, you read about it, right? People that just get exposed to stuff on the Internet that, boy, I didn't even think I had a fetish for that, and all of a sudden I have this fetish. And there's the idea, I think Paula Hall talks about the opportunity-based addiction, where it wasn't coming from trauma, it was coming from, there's just this opportunity, and then it becomes an addictive process, because all of us as human beings like pleasure, right? So you find something that makes your pleasure circuitry fire, and all of a sudden you're getting hooked on something that, you know, again, you're not responding to trauma from your past. But my experience is that's mostly the case, like you said, about 85%, that people are, it's like a reaction to something from early on in their life. But yeah, I guess like anything, you can kind of get snagged up into something that makes you feel good, and all of a sudden you're, you know, getting consumed by it. And you know, I had a pretty decent family growing up, and things are pretty good in my marriage, and all of a sudden I'm a porn addict. So, yeah.
Well, and I would think that when you take something that has been so damaging and wounding and you make something good out of it, like this documentary, to educate people. I mean, it reminds me of the 5 men that put together the SAA book or the Essanon book. I mean, truly, they're turning something that was very wounding into something that will help thousands and perhaps millions of other people. And that's where I see your documentary. I mean, this is the first documentary on sexual addiction, is it not?
Yeah, I've looked into that. I mean, there's something right now that's on the internet. I can't remember the name, but it's a Christian-based, but its focus is just on the porn addiction, and it comes from a Christian lens. And I wanted this to be kind of more of a humanistic journey of people's stories. And so, yeah, if you put in, one of the reasons I did this too is I got back from this meditation retreat years ago and to put on Amazon.com sex addiction documentary, and 0 results came up. I was like, oh man, I got to do a documentary about this. That's crazy. There's zero documentaries out there. So yeah, so it's definitely one of the first. I'm not aware of anything else, but there'll be other ones after this, and I hope. And it's just an honor to be able to do it and share it with people. And I have 3 screens coming up, which I'm very excited about, and 1 in Seattle, 2 in Los Angeles, and I'm so blown away again by the power of sharing this and how healing it feels for me, and I feel very blessed that I got chosen. I feel like this is just one of the callings I have.
Well, and it's all about gratitude. We know that. And so let me remind our listeners that I am talking to Paul Ginocchio, and he's a marriage and family therapist. You can actually take a look at his website. He has 2 of them, www.paulginocchio.mft.com, and I'm going to spell that. It's Ginocchio. So that's Paul, Ginocchio, MFT.com, or an easier website, which is thecouragetolove.com, which obviously is based right off of the documentary. And I think you heard me earlier talking about the fact that truly, if you want to read the filmmaker's statement, the listeners can go to www.thecouragetolove.com/statement.cfm. And because that definitely gives some interesting insight. The woman that you referenced early on that was your first documentary person, she was good with having shared her story until she got a new job, and the documentary hadn't come out, and her fear overtook her, and she was afraid that it would affect her new job. And I get that, and I'm sure you do too. The fact that clearly when you say you have a sexual addiction, if people don't understand it, they don't know what that means, and they get scared, and then they judge you, and perhaps want to isolate you from their homes, from their families, from their coworkers, that kind of thing. And so Paul makes real what this situation is like. And, I mean, each and every one of you, as you describe the situation, you were just normal people who were reenacting a trauma you experienced as a child that became compulsive and took over your life. It was. You said again, it was Greg that he lost his wife, he lost his family, he lost his job, he lost everything.
Jay, he was the exhibitionist. Yeah, he had like a big, I guess, a radio talk show down in Houston, Texas. He was a big sports guy in the sports world down there back in the 80s, and had a radio show, and he ran this high school basketball scouting program that was really well known, especially in Texas area. And so he was married with 2 kids when he got arrested for exhibitionism, and so he lost his career and everything, and turned again lemons in the lemonade. I mean, he ended up moving to Seattle, Washington, and became a counselor, and now works as a sex addiction. He calls himself a sex addiction coach because he's not licensed, but he's helped a ton of guys and women, and runs a program called No More Secrets up there. And so, yeah, I mean, again, it's this idea that we can turn this shameful thing into something that we can be proud of and we can help others with.
Well, you know, it's interesting you said that, because so many clients, when they do get a lot of recovery under their belt, they aspire to be a counselor so that they can help other clients. And if I'm not mistaken, Jay became, according to your documentary, a recovery coach. And
yes.
Recovery coaches are specialists in the niche of recovery. And so for our listeners out there, if you've got serious recovery under your belt, and maybe you're an IT person, maybe you're a housekeeper, it matters not. You can get special certification that allows you to be a recovery coach and help other addicts. And you can just tell that Jay's got a winning personality. He certainly has the experience. He's absolutely hit rock bottom, and he's just changed his life around. And I don't know about you, but my experience is when somebody really recovers, they usually can turn their life around and increase their meaning to life exponentially.
Yeah, and can I tell you, I don't know how much time we have. Do we have a little time?
Oh, we sure do. You've got 13 minutes.
Oh, okay, good, because I want to tell you quickly. So after that woman backed out of my project, I was really disheartened, and I thought, you know, this is just not meant to be. This is, you know, I thought I had this good thing going, and I'm getting lots of no's, and then finally get an interview, and she changes her mind and threatened me with a lawsuit. And then one day, this is where I believe in higher power, because one day I was just, again, I went on Amazon.com, and I searched sex and love addiction memoir or something, and up came Jay's book. So I never heard of him before. His name's Jay Parker. And up came his book called From Shame to Grace, His Journey Recovering from Sex and Love Addiction, Jay Parker. So I bought his book, I read it, and then I thought, you know, maybe he'd be in my documentary, you know. So I ended up calling him, and this is back in 2007, and that was really, for me, the jumpstart of this film getting done, because he said yes. He's like, come on up to Seattle, and so I, you know, months later, planned the trip and packed up my car and drove up by myself and had my video equipment. And Jay hooked me up with Greg, who's in the film. And Jay was just, I mean, right when I met him, I just felt like, man, he's an emblem of recovery, because he's that twinkle in his eyes, just a very clear human being. And I could tell he was helping a lot of people up there. And so I just look back and think, what a miracle that day I was searching on Amazon and came across a book I never heard of, and then all these years later, here's this guy who's in my film, and like I said, he hasn't seen the film yet, so that'll be really fun. This Saturday, I'm flying to Seattle and showing it up there in front of an audience of 120 people, and him and Greg will both be in the audience, so it's going to be really exciting to share it with him.
Absolutely. Now, again, tell us where the screening is, and are tickets still available?
Yeah, well, so it's at this place in downtown Seattle called the Northwest Film Forum, and if you go to my website, thecouragetolove.com, it's on there. If you do upcoming screenings, there's upcoming screenings, and it shows you all the information on there. Doors, we're just selling tickets at the door because I didn't set up an internet thing for that, but that's coming up this Saturday. Like I said, I'm really excited to share it. Me and Jay and maybe even Greg are going to get up afterwards and facilitate a discussion with the audience, which I found to be really just awesome. This last screening, just so many questions. My God, we left a half an hour at the end of this last screening to talk and answer questions, and we basically had to cut them off. There was just question after question after question after question. So people are just really, I think, starved for information about this, and again, so I'm really looking forward to sharing this up in Seattle this Saturday.
Well, you can tell that you're on a high from this, and who wouldn't be? And again, I got to tell you, I'm talking to Paul Ginocchio, who is a marriage and family therapist, and he has done the documentary, thecouragetolove.com. The website is the same, www.thecouragetolove.com. And it is a depiction of 4 different people's stories as to how they went from that first, what I call brain lock, when something happened to them that was traumatizing, and how they either medicated themselves or reenacted that trauma in a different way, and how that turned into full-blown sexual addiction. And obviously, all 4 of these people are in serious recovery. It's a day at a time, but you can tell that all 4 of you are devoting your lives to the 12th step, which we won't go into here, but it's obviously giving back to the community and helping others. And let's face it, that's the circle of life. No matter what anybody ascribes to, it's giving back that makes people know their purpose, and it certainly gives them passion. So I would encourage my listeners to go to thecouragetolove.com, and you can either rent this movie, you can buy this movie. As you had indicated, that there's a streaming download, it's available for purchase on DVD, and can they get it anywhere else?
Yeah, so right now it's available DVD, or they can rent it on the website, or they can download it and pay for it that way. That's it right now. I'm gonna eventually, because I'm self-distributed at this point, I'm gonna have it on Amazon and Netflix and stuff eventually, but I'm not there yet. Right now I'm just kind of focused on getting the screenings organized, and I wanted to make it available for the rental, and so I'm like I said, I'm excited. I'm getting people renting it from all over the world, and getting the occasional little email, thank you so much for making this. I had a guy at my last screening, it was very sweet. I have index cards at the end, and they say, if you want to write either anonymously or not, any kind of feedback or your response to the film, and leave it in the box over there, you can. And one person anonymously just wrote, God, it kind of broke my heart reading it, was, I just wish I would have seen this film when I was younger, because it might have saved me from destroying my life like I have. And, wow, I read that, I got tears in my eyes. I thought, that's just because the silence about this addiction it's still startling. I mean, one thing, Carol, I'm dreading, because I know it's going to happen, is because I see it on the listservs I'm on, is there's still a lot of professionals who do not believe in sex addiction or sexual addiction, and can get quite opinionated about it. And I haven't had to deal with that yet, but I did contact a therapist early on when I was filming the film, because I thought, I want to show the opposing side and what they say. And I won't mention his name, but he wrote some stuff about the myth of sexual addiction and stuff. So I contacted him, and he on the phone asked me if I was in recovery for it, and I said yes. And then he called me an addictionologist, and he said, you're just trying to pathologize sexuality, and he ended up hanging up on me, which I was like, wow, this is unbelievable to me. I just wanted to see if he'd be interviewed for my film. So there's still a lot of resistance, even amongst professionals, that this is an actual addiction. And, it's not in the DSM, so technically it's not a diagnosable addiction. But
Yet.
Yeah. Yet.
Well, I think this would be the perfect documentary listening audience for you to take to your retreats in the spring and in the fall, and to show it either during a break or to view it during one of your breakout sessions, so that you can talk about sexual addiction. I mean, I see it as being so educational. It should be in social work classes, psychology classes, psychiatry classes. It should be available in all the hospitals. I get that there's stigma and shame. One of the things that I had wanted to do was I wanted to educate our leading drug and alcohol hospital about sexual addiction, because what we know is if alcohol and drugs are treated, sexual addiction is not, and it tends to go up. And so when sexual addiction goes down, then drug and alcohol use can go up. So I was talking to them, and they said, oh, Carol, we'd love to have you. We know this to be true, but we are a not-for-profit hospital, and we don't want to lose our funding from the philanthropy that we've got going on out in the community. And so that stigma is out there. I know it's going to change, but again, I say we're all pioneers working towards spreading the word and destigmatizing and de-shaming the situation. So, again, Paul, I absolutely love this film. I'll do everything I can to promote it. You use me in any way you need. And for my listening audience, I would go to his website one more time. That's www.thecouragetolove.com. Rent the movie. I'm sure it's affordable, the documentary. It's an hour. Or go ahead and buy it and then distribute it, during the retreat. Make sure that people get to see it because, SAA and SA, they have their retreats and they have spring and fall events, and I just think it would be a wonderful way to get the word out and maybe even to educate the partners who sometimes come to these retreats that don't quite get it yet. They've been harmed by it, but they don't get it, and you did a beautiful job of explaining it. So, Paul, again, thank you so very much.
Oh, thank you, Carol. I really appreciate talking with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything I can do to help, don't hesitate to call Carol the Coach.
Okay.
All right. Have a great week, and let us know when you put out your next documentary because you definitely have a gift.
It's going to be a book, I think, next.
All right. Well, let me know.
Okay. Thanks, Carol.
All right.
Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye. All right. So we were talking with Paul Ginocchio. Boy, did I botch his name at the beginning of the show. But, hey, we're all human, and sometimes I forget to do that. I forget to say, hey, send me the phonetic spelling of your name, please. We are all human. We're all real. And, again, I want you to take a look at this. Everybody that I've showed it to has been amazed at the work. TheCourageToLove.com. Go and stream it. Rent it via streaming, the download, or buy it, and then pass it around. Share the word. Don't duplicate it, but pass it around. Okay, so I will look forward to talking with you next week. And, it's always exciting to be able to educate my listening audience with what's new and upcoming in the field of sexual addiction. So as I say at the end of every show, and I mean this, there really will only be one of you. So at all times, I want you to fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. I want you to work the tools, make your life better, and when that occurs, then you can actually actualize your life to the next level. And you can be the person that other people aspire to. And it's all about coming full circle. That's what life's about. So I so appreciate you no matter what stage of this addiction you're in, no matter what stage of this recovery you're in if you're a partner. And I look forward to working with you again here on Sex Help with Carol the Coach. See you next Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Have a great week.